have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And if you've been reading the Times and listening
As
to
you
the
were
news,
until 5 seconds ago.
same-sex marriage is now a settled issue in Pennsylvania because the Republican governor Tom Corbett has declined to appeal the order striking down the state's ban on it.
A couple of other Republican governors are hedging their opposition to same-sex marriage, and Utah's Gary Herbert is digging in.
And more Catholic schools are digging in against teachers who do not subscribe to their, let me say it plainly, bigotry.
The U.S. Census has made another adjustment in how they count us now that they acknowledge we're married. We'll give you the update on that.
The WNBA is the first professional league in the United States to market itself to LGBT folks. Stay tuned and we'll tell you what those acronyms stand for.
And watch for them at your local Pride event. North Dakota has now been heard from, or will be soon. It's announced in anticipation. So now all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and there's a lawsuit in Puerto Rico too, either have marriage equality or a lawsuit to win it.
Well, then I'm just going to pack all this up and we can go to the beach, right?
No.
We're done, right? We've won,
Not
right?
today, it's freezing.
No, we have some sad news. Stonewall Rebellion veteran Stormy DeLarvery has died at 94, and SAGES, the Senior Action in a Gay Environment, longtime director Arlene Kochman has passed away.
South Africa gets its first out gay black member of parliament.
And Nathan Lane in Broadway's The Nance, which we saw last season, is going to be coming to a movie theater near you. And I want to correct myself right away. SAGE now stands for Services and Advocacy for Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Elders.
And I will correct something we said last week because we were... I'll go gentle because I like Nancy, but a viewer...
Not the Nance, but Nancy.
Told us that Nathan Lane had officiated at the Modern Family wedding ceremony of the gay men. It turns out he was the wedding planner.
Well, wedding planners are really in charge.
Well, it also reveals that
You stand over there.
Neither of us watches
You
Modern
stand
Family.
over there. It's true. We've been exposed here.
Yeah.
But...
Well, let's go to real-life marriage.
Well, we do start in Pennsylvania, where marriages have gone forward since last week, and Republican Governor Tom Corbett, who is up for re-election this year, and who opposes same-sex marriage, he saw the legal writing on the wall, and he decided not to appeal, so that is that.
Well, he saw it in front of him at 4:30 in the morning, which is how late he stayed up reading the opinion of the court.
Well, he's like a former attorney general or something, or prosecutor. He's a lawyer, so he knows.
Many of them are.
And he said, we're not going to win. And
Exactly.
I don't want to waste the resources on this. I mean, Chris Christie did the same thing.
Exactly, and so did one or two others. Schwarzenegger did the same thing. He's not the first, but he decided, I'm not going to appeal this. I'm going to let it go ahead. Now, some think it's because he is up for re-election, and he doesn't want to give the Democrats another reason to hate him.
The same thing's going on in Wisconsin, where Scott Walker, who's a right-wing Republican, he sort of backed away from his support for a constitutional ban on same-sex marriage, saying he didn't know if it was constitutional or not under the federal Constitution, or whether it would be approved by the voters if it came before them today. So since I'm up for re-election, maybe I'm not sure where I stand.
Yeah, but meanwhile, I'm writing a letter to the court that is considering same-sex marriage and asking the judge, before she makes her decision, to stay her decision.
He signed that letter too? Because it's from the Attorney General, who is J.B. Van Hollen.
He told the Attorney General to send the letter.
All right.
Asking for a stay before the decision even comes down. Now, Montana Governor Steve Bullock announced that he supports same-sex marriage and the lawsuit that is being brought in Montana to make it legal.
But some Republicans have standards. In Virginia, Republican delegate Bob Marshall has filed resolutions seeking to impeach the Attorney General Mark Herring for, now get this quote, removing all standards against same-sex marriage or sodomy marriage, he calls it, to the detriment of children.
Does he know how many heterosexuals practice sodomy? Does he know the definition?
I don't know.
It doesn't have to do with the gender of your partner.
In some places it does. I mean, some places had homosexual-only sodomy laws.
Yes, but that they had to explicitly
sodomy
say,
essentially means non-vaginal intercourse.
Yes.
And it was illegal for heterosexual married couples to do it in some places.
Exactly, and still frowned upon often. The National Organization for Marriage has asked the Supreme Court of the United States to stop legal marriage in Oregon. They're not expected to get anywhere with this, but their argument is that it was an unfair fight because no one opposed it. The state officials said, we're not against this. Go ahead, make it legal.
Right.
And NAM says, oh, we tried to get in the case at the last minute and they wouldn't let us in. Well, that's actually still up for discussion, but because they're appealing their rejection, but they've asked the Supreme Court.
So, to our viewers in Illinois, and environs, same-sex marriage will be legal across the state on June the 1st. Already 20 of the 102 counties have been allowing it.
And a lot of people from out of state have been going to those 20 approximate counties to get married from all the surrounding states, including, for instance, Wisconsin. Now, back to the National Organization for Marriage for a minute. We told you last week that in Maine, they were discussing whether or not to penalize NAM for not revealing its donors in their election campaigns about same-sex marriage. And sure enough, the Maine Ethics Commission met this week and has formally levied a fine of $50,250 against NAM, the largest fine they've ever handed out, and also ordered that NAM reveal the names of its donors. This is all about NAM doing money laundering for donors who wanted to donate to an anti-same-sex marriage campaign. Normally, you're required to reveal donors in that situation, but if the donors give the money to the organization without saying this is how we want you to use it, and the organization says, well, we're just taking the money and we just decided 5 minutes after they gave it to us to spend it this way, then that's supposed to work. But the Maine Ethics Commission called this, said, if we believe NAM, we'll create a mockery of our elections. And NAM then said, we're not going to comply with the release of names and the fine.
How could you make more of a mockery of U.S. elections than has already been made by the lack of campaign finance laws?
I'm quite proud of the Maine Ethics Commission for this decision, and of Fred Karger, who's the one who has pushed this endlessly. And he had a hilarious string of tweets about this, because he went to the hearing of the Maine Ethics Commission. If you follow Fred Karger or are inclined to do so, you'll see about his whole confrontation with Brian Brown of NAM.
And there's a documentary out about his race for the Republican nomination for president.
Brian Brown said they had to keep the names of the donors secret because there had been shootings and people would be in danger.
Did we talk about Jamie McShane and the judge, the Outgate judge in Oregon?
We mentioned him.
He's the one who struck down the ban.
Yeah.
But an opposition group was going to challenge his hearing the case until he actually made clear that he and his long-term partner have no intention of marrying.
Please.
Hey, why should he even have to say that?
Yeah. Well,
or why would he even answer a question like that?
Exactly. Should not have. All right, we're burying the headline here a little. We've been waiting for this final shoe to drop. In North Dakota, there will be a suit filed in the next 6 to 8 weeks asking for same-sex marriage to be legalized. It's going to be filed by the same Minnesota lawyer who filed the suit last week in South Dakota on behalf of 6 couples there. So
it's on to the territories. Ann said we got Puerto Rico with a suit, but there's Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands and American Samoa and the Northern Mariana Islands, and that's not including some atolls.
And I assume all that would be covered by a Supreme Court decision.
I don't know. In territories?
Aren't they subject to U.S. laws?
Yes. Oh, well, I don't know. You know, I was on the Wikipedia trying to find all this today, and I'm not sure what kind of autonomy they have.
At least you got the list complete. Speaking of strange answers from the judge, have you seen what these women who are the Democratic nominees for the U.S. Senate in Kentucky and Georgia have been saying about same-sex marriage?
No.
Well, this is the woman who's going to run against Mitch McConnell,
yes.
Allison Grimes,
Yes.
and Sam Nunn's daughter, who's running for Senate in Georgia. Sam Nunn, icky. They've been asked about same-sex marriage, and they say, well, you know, I'm kind of for same-sex marriage, but like the Supreme Court, I believe this is a states' rights issue.
And where do you stand on it?
They're for it, but they believe the state should decide.
That was somewhat the position of the administration going into the Supreme Court cases last year.
The point of the states' rights part of the Supreme Court decision is they said states do have the right to define marriage, but in doing so, they may not discriminate in ways that are unconstitutional.
Well, but they didn't make a blanket statement about that. They didn't say that
Well, they didn't legalize same-sex marriage yet, but they said in the DOMA case that you have to. This is left up to the states, but you cannot discriminate unconstitutionally. And so these statements about its states' rights, this is what all the anti-marriage people are claiming in these lawsuits. The Supreme Court said it's a states' rights issue. And the answer is yes, but.
So why didn't the Supreme Court just say that all those state laws are unconstitutional as well?
Because you forget that it's only since the Supreme Court decision that we've had another X number of states legalize this. All these lawsuits
they heard the
filed.
cases at the same time.
But
they fudged it.
Well, they also had a real interest in making a ruling on standing.
Yes, I understand.
And that's something that's been on their docket for a long time, or on their minds.
Okay.
So I have no argument with that.
So we got South Dakota.
Well, as long as you brought up Prop 8 and that case, let's also say that the Olson-Boyce book on this is coming out and seems to be, in some ways, worse than the Joe Becker book.
There is also a documentary coming out in theaters on June the 6th, and it will be on HBO on June 23rd, The Case Against Prop 8. And I did watch it the other night on a screener, and it was outrageous. I mean, it is like that case exists in a vacuum. It's all about the heroism of Chad Griffin and his AFER group and Olson and Boyce. Now, you do get behind the scenes and you meet the plaintiffs and their struggle for this and how they prepare for it. That's kind of interesting. But how about mentioning there are already 18,000 same-sex married couples in California. It's not like it's something new. How about the fact that we've had marriage in Massachusetts for 10 years. I mean, you know,
how about the heroes who brought these cases 40 years ago?
But Edie Windsor doesn't appear. Plus, you know, if you haven't picked up on it, I think what Chad Griffin is doing is contemptible.
Yes.
For him to sit, and he says in this movie, I didn't realize I was going to be having to fight the gays more than the other side. And then they say people from his group, the American Foundation for Equal Rights, say the things that the other gay leaders are saying and doing to them and all this kind of stuff. In a documentary, let them say it. Let them have their voice. HBO should be, and Sheila Nevins should be ashamed of themselves.
They don't know what they're doing.
Well,
this is all celebrity journalism. Now, here are a couple of other points. The Olson-Boyce book says Evan Wolfson borrows from Chad's playbook. Evan Wolfson borrows from Chad's playbook. Mary Bonato is completely left out of the Olson-Boyce book.
Mary Bonato from Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders in Massachusetts, which won the first same-sex marriage case.
10 years earlier.
Well, although Evan won one in 1996 in the Hawaii trial court also, with his co-counsel there, who was...
Dan...
Yeah.
What's his
Foley.
name? Thank you.
Pretty good, huh? We were on the air then,
But
too.
here's the thing that I think is, that I understand happens in the Prop 8 film. Completely left out of the film is the San Francisco Assistant Attorney General, Teresa Stewart, who came into the Prop 8 case with Olson and Boyce because she wanted to make a particular argument in the case that was more narrow than theirs, that would allow for California alone to regain same-sex marriage, whereas they have this grandiose vision of the whole country. And she's not even in the film, and it was her argument that won the case.
Here's how shameless this documentary is. At the Supreme Court, when the crowd is outside, what you mostly see as a scene is HRC flags waving in the wind because Chad Griffin has moved on to HRC and he wants you to give money to that group. Folks, it's for, I mean, I realize, you know, I'm going to say it. It's you want to invest in this movement, do something at the local level with your brothers and sisters in your neighborhood rather than give into that group.
We have a whole other argument against HRC coming up in just a few minutes.
All right,
so
let's finish
stay
up with
tuned
marriage.
for that. Yes.
But we're doing pretty well. 55% of Americans in the Gallup poll now support it, 42% opposed. Support has doubled since 1996. What other idea could we normalize in 20 years? Maybe economic justice or something. You know?
Let's work on that. I interrupted you. You were going to
South Dakota?
Yes.
6 couples filed a federal suit on May 22nd. 5 already married elsewhere. Then that's no.
We knew it was coming. We've been talking about it, but the suit actually got filed last week after we taped last week's show. So this is just putting the nail in that. In Topeka, Kansas, they have put together a domestic partner registry for both same-sex and opposite-sex couples, a gender employment non-discrimination law for city hiring, and they're trying to get health coverage for city employees' domestic partners. Topeka.
Yeah.
Fred Phelps is spinning in his grave.
Well, more about him. Well, wait a minute. What about Fred Phelps' support supposedly coming to the porch of his house and saying to his grandson about Equality House, the rainbow-painted place across the street, "You're good people." This is the story the grandson is telling. The grandson defected from the group, and he says this about his grandfather. Now, I need a little bit more evidence that he turned on. He was excommunicated from the parish.
How about all those religious leaders that tell us how much they love us? They just hate what we're doing.
Like Cardinal Dolan.
Yeah. All right. In Utah,
yeah.
Let's just see if we can get this video going from Utah. They're having an election in Utah, and particularly an a state attorney general's race. And we know the newly appointed state attorney general brought the lawsuit. They're fighting us on the merit, appealing.
He wasn't very fast on his feet.
And neither am I.
So we got a lot of people married out there, 1,300.
Exactly. So now there's a Democrat running against him, this has become a big issue in the race, and we may have a local news report on this.
Thanks so much for being with us for 2 News at 10 o'clock. The fight over same-sex marriage could be the deciding factor in the upcoming race for Attorney General.
Yeah, sitting Attorney General Sean Reyes has made his position clear. His Democratic opponent sees things much differently.
Christina Flores live with more on how same-sex marriage will affect the AG's race. Christina?
Well, Shauna, Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes has said he will defend Utah's ban on same-sex marriage all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. But his opponent, who happens to work under him, says, with all due respect to his boss, he couldn't disagree more.
It's one of the first issues that's clearly come out where the candidates are sharply divided.
Democratic candidate for Attorney General Charles Stormont says the issue of same-sex marriage in Utah has set him far apart from his opponent, sitting Attorney General Sean Reyes. Reyes has said he will fight for Utah's ban on same-sex marriage.
I think the only way that we can truly restore long-term trust in the office from the public is to have the Attorney General defend all of the laws passed by our state and by its people.
But Charles Stormont, a lawyer in the Attorney General's office, thinks his boss has it wrong.
I wouldn't have picked this fight in the first place.
Stormont says a Utah federal judge should have had the last word when he declared same-sex marriage legal.
At that point, it was time to stop the fight. It was time to leave these families alone and let them enjoy their rights and their fundamental freedoms.
Stormont thinks Utah is fighting an expensive and losing battle.
The damages that the state is going to have to pay these families at the end of the day when the state ultimately loses.
Now the cost of that battle could go up even more if Utah appeals a judge's ruling Wednesday that says the state must recognize 1,300 same-sex marriages that happened last year. In a statement, Sean Reyes said, quote, "As Attorney General, I do not have the liberty or luxury of choosing which laws to defend. My sworn duty is to support, obey, and defend all the laws of the state of Utah." As to the legality of same-sex marriage, he said, quote, "The question of constitutionality in this case has yet to be answered." Now, Mark and Sean Reyes and Charles Stormont have only one debate scheduled at this point, and it's not until October. So unless they schedule any more sooner, it'll be a while before Utahns can hear them in a live debate. Back to you.
All right, Christina, thanks.
Governor Gary Herbert is not waiting there in Utah. He called homosexuality a choice, and he says that other state officials around the country who won't defend marriage bans will lead us to anarchy. And so the Utah Pride Center called that hate speech.
Well, in fact, the U.S. Census Bureau is clearing up a little anarchy. It was 1990 that they first recognized same-sex couples living together in the United States Senate, in part by thanks to the work of Lee Badgett, now at the Williams Institute.
Put us under unmarried partners.
Living together.
Yeah.
It's all about living together. So it was only a slice of the community, but it was all they had to do was look at people who reported living together and who were of the same gender and who declared themselves unmarried partners, and they had it. And then when people started getting legally married 10 years ago, they had a conundrum because DOMA was still in place and the federal government was not allowed to recognize same-sex marriages.
Well, they're not saying they had a conundrum. The head of the family statistics there said that the Windsor decision did not obligate them to do anything, but it made it easier to throw us in with other married couples. And there are now 180,000 same-sex marriages. So in this 2013 American Community Survey,
that's what they do between the censuses.
So
or censi.
Up until now, we have been unmarried partners, even when the couples reported themselves as spouses.
Yes, they were converted to unmarried partners living together. But I think he's being a little disingenuous about the DOMA decision, because I think if they hadn't done this, they would have been challenged and urged to count married couples as married couples. And now they're going to do that. So that's a good thing.
But just to summarize, 26 states now have same-sex marriage or have struck down their bans. People are asking if we're at a tipping point, but NAM, the National Organization for Marriage, says Justice Kennedy's going to slap them down at the Supreme Court. You think?
I had a fight with someone about this last week.
Yep.
I think we are at the tipping point.
You are, okay.
Yes. All right, well, as long as we're at the federal government, let's start with the White House ceremony for revealing the Harvey Milk stamp. You've already seen it here, but so we won't show you that again. But what we will show you is a little demonstration outside. Demonstrators were saying, hey, what about an executive order for requiring federal contractors not to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity?
Maybe I'll ask that of Secretary of the Interior Sally Jewell on Friday. She's supposed to be here in New York at the Stonewall bar with the Gill Foundation to announce the National Park Service initiative to ensure the agency is telling a complete story of American heritage and history, including us, I assume. Otherwise, why are you going to the Stonewall unless you need a drink?
I did watch the White House ceremony revealing the stamp, and online they live streamed it. But it was just one single camera on the stage, and you couldn't see anyone in the audience or see their reactions or anything. It was very sort of static.
Well, I talked to Thomas Krever who heads the Hetrick Martin Institute for Gay Youth, which runs the Harvey Milk High School, and they got a couple of shout-outs from the stage.
Yes, I saw that.
Yes.
And they shouted back.
So what's going on in Houston?
A couple things. First of all, as we tape, the city council there is debating a non-discrimination law. It wouldn't have much teeth, but it would be symbolic because Houston is one of the largest cities not to have any non-discrimination protections. So you will know if you look it up before how the vote turns out tonight.
They're making progress. They're making the bill stronger.
Yeah, but it's still not terribly strong, and a $500 fine is about the worst that any company faces.
Well, it sounds like they're doing better than ExxonMobil.
Yes.
They rejected protections for LGBT employees for the what time?
17th year. I'm calling them the Susan Lucci of non-discrimination.
We didn't even get 20% of the vote, which was a shareholder motion brought by the New York State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli.
We're actually going backwards on that. And the only way for ExxonMobil to get its Emmy is probably federal legislation. Now, that is what we're fighting with ENDA.
What about an
with
executive
HRC
order? Aren't they
about.
federal contractors?
Oh, yes, they are. And that would certainly be another way of doing it. There are different mechanisms involved in an executive order and a law, and an executive order, of course, can always be repealed or withdrawn by the next President Jeb Bush or whomever we're anticipating in the White House. But HRC is pushing non-discrimination. They have we'll get to this on what they're doing about these Catholic school teachers that have been fired, but ExxonMobil, Houston, they're pushing all of this, yes, pass all these non-discrimination things and pass the federal ENDA. But the federal ENDA contains a religious exemption that is exactly the kind of discrimination they claim to be fighting against in these Catholic school cases.
Yeah, so
let's talk about those.
Why does Chad Griffin want to talk to the Pope? What's he going to talk about?
He wrote a letter on behalf of 9 teachers who'd been fired by Catholic schools, either because they're gay or because they support family members who are gay.
Or they got married to someone of the same sex, even if they're not gay.
A rare case, I would think.
Well,
the opposite, yes.
7% of marriages are for benefits.
Sure, and there was a lot of that in France when they passed their reciprocal benefits law.
Well, that's because if you're a civil employee, if you're a teacher and you're married to somebody, you get to stay where they are. You don't get sent to the hinterlands to teach.
All right. Well, the current cases are Mount DeSales Academy in Macon, Georgia, which has fired a guy with the memorable name of Flint Dollar.
Yep.
He was the band director for the school. He was out. They're all out. The school knows about all of them. But when they then go ahead and marry their partners, suddenly they're fired.
They like you to live in sin.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? The students are standing up for Flint. They set up a Facebook page of support.
And back in Seattle, Mark Zmuda, who was the gay administrator who was fired by Eastside Catholic High School in December for marrying his partner, a motion to dismiss his lawsuit against the diocese and the school was rejected by the King County Superior Court. Lawyers for the school are very disappointed. They said Zmuda's responsibilities were inextricably tied to the magisterium of the church.
I was going to ask you about that.
That is heavy. Heavy.
But so the
magisterium.
school tried to get
kinky.
the school tried to get the civil suit dismissed on the grounds that it violated their religious freedom, and the court said nonsense.
Also, the school handbook says it won't discriminate based on sexual orientation. The school told him if he'd divorce, they would have paid for a commitment ceremony. He's moved on, which is what I recommend everybody do when you're discriminated against. Yes, get another. He's the assistant principal at Mercer Island High School.
But HRC is complaining about these cases, writing the Pope, and then pushing a law federally that would allow these schools to fire these teachers. It makes no sense. And when you ask them about it, their answer is
No. Fred Sains from HRC
has an answer.
Has made a statement. It was in Gay City News. When they said, we're just trying to get what we can get now. Something is better than nothing.
That is not
true.
Not when you are going backwards on the religious exemption.
And not when you enshrine discrimination against these people. I've had this fight with a lot of longtime gay activists who say, but wouldn't it be better if we were covered? Look, when we tried to pass the gay rights bill in New York years ago, they said, well, if you'll just exempt teachers. Well, we said, are you kidding? What Unthinkable.
We had this fight over ENDA before with inclusion of gender identity and expression.
Right.
That was a long, painful fight. They finally rewrote the bill to be inclusive. But this is not about gradualism. You can make a case for gradualism, a bad case, but you can make a case for gradualism.
Well, I mean,
this is a backward step.
Yes. We were kind of willing to accept, okay, we'll just go for employment.
Yeah.
As long as it covers all employment.
Yeah.
But they haven't just exempted some religious organizations. And by the way, when we say this, folks, we're not talking about the Catholic Church ordaining women or gays or anything. We're talking about Catholic hospitals where a lot of Catholics work being discriminated against.
Exactly.
All right.
And this whole business we've seen starting in Ohio is now spreading of the archdiocese wanting new teacher contracts that are very restrictive. So now Oakland, California's archdiocese has mandated a new restrictive teacher contract. Some teachers are actually refusing to sign it and protesting it.
You have to model and promote behavior in conformity with the teaching of the Roman Catholic faith. So that means no meat on the Fridays of Lent. Got it?
And in Seattle, here's another common story. The Catholic hospital system, specifically Providence Hospital, has bought a non-Catholic hospital, Swedish Hospital. Now, Swedish Hospital had a non-discrimination policy that included sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. Guess what? The new non-discrimination policy by the new Catholic owners takes out sexual orientation and gender identity.
That's nothing. Right here in the city of New York.
Yes.
If the Board of Education rents an old Catholic school that's closed, they can't do sex education there in perpetuity.
Rents, buys.
Yeah, or buys it. They have a clause in it that makes them go off-site and teach sex education in trailers.
Terrible.
Ridiculous.
Have I got another one there? And of course, if Houston does manage to pass this very mild non-discrimination law, the right wing in Texas is threatening to mount a recall petition against Mayor Anise Parker.
Oh, and don't forget, what about a referendum against the law? When Houston had a referendum on their law in the early 80s, it passed 9-1 in the vote. The KKK made common cause with African-American preachers.
Whoa.
Seriously.
Yep.
All right. The New York Times has called on Governor Andrew Cuomo here in New York State to show some leadership and get transgender rights passed, finally, as it has been in the Assembly, in the state Senate. And they're asking him to speak up and do something the way he did do on marriage.
Well, that would be nice. And in Rochester, New York, a local radio station has fired a couple of hosts who ridiculed the idea of city health coverage for transgender people who are transitioning, called trans people nut jobs. And luckily, the radio station said that does not represent our point of view, and you are out of a job. And they apologized quite sincerely, I think, and accepted their firing.
We've told you a lot about the horrible experience of murder music and reggae dancehall music. A lot of these quote-unquote artists say horrible things about gay people, including someone named Queen Ifrica, who said, we're not going to legalize any faggotism in Jamaica. So, out in Queens, Councilmember Danny Drum and a group called Jamaica Anti-Homophobia Stand got the concert hall out there, Amazura, to cancel the performance. They did. And they're going to be, as we sit here, they're going to be demonstrating at BB King's on 42nd Street because they've got the murder music singer Capleton. This guy signed the Reggae Compassionate Act, which says you're not going to do it anymore. A few months later, in 2007.
Right out and did it.
He can't contain himself.
And lest you think we're the only ones upset by this, Queen Ifrica had also been rejected as a UNICEF ambassador because of her talk like that.
She loves children, just not gay children.
Yeah. Now, also on a firing note, CNN has fired a microphone technician, and he says he was fired because he is gay and flamboyant at work. He liked to wear mariachi outfits
And they were quite charmed by it.
I think we have a second picture of him with with Christiane Amanpour, if we can pull that picture up. That may be a fast switch, where she's quite enjoying him.
Is.
Yes, in one of his mariachi outfits.
Yes.
But CNN has fired him.
It's terrible. It should be against the law.
His supervisor told him he belonged in the entertainment or makeup department. God.
All right, it is prom season, and in Connecticut at Danbury High School, they elected, and we have a picture of him, out gay student Nasir Fleming as the prom queen.
Yes.
He received his crown to great enthusiasm, and he said that while he identifies as male, his win is a blow against transphobia.
Sure, because as we try to point out, all gender nonconforming of whatever sort falls under a great trans umbrella. But that fight is still going on over language and definitions. Justin Vivian Bond wrote a very angry public letter this week. RuPaul is still angry at people going after him. And what it seems to break down to is this divide between basically the drag community, although Justin Bond is certainly trans, and the transsexual community of people who want to live their life in their newly defined gender. And they don't want to be called trannies because they want to be accepted as full human beings for who they are, whereas the drag community is more likely to embrace language like that as, you know, all of it being kind of a play with definitions.
Some of us aren't fond of the use of the word queer.
Exactly.
But some of us are.
Or in... But the point is, where do you draw the line, and who's allowed to use what language? And the people who don't like it don't want anyone using it, and the people who do like it say, don't tell me what to say.
I have given up on queer with others, but I don't use it myself.
Okay.
I know the young people, many of you use it.
And the Williams Institute has a new report that says there are approximately 15,000 transgender members of the military, the U.S. military, either on active duty or in the reserves or National Guard, and that another 134,000 transgender people have served in the military in the U.S.
But the new president of the Boy Scouts, Robert Gates, who was our former Secretary of Defense, who guided through the getting rid of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, is saying he's not up for revisiting the policy of banning gay scoutmasters.
He's for out gay scoutmasters. He'd love to revisit it, but he says that it's not the right time, and to bring it up at this point would be too divisive, given the Mormon character of the...
Well, let me just condemn him for that.
Okay.
All right. We lost some great figures in our community this week. We have, I think, a picture of Stonewall veteran Stormy DeLarvery. Is that how we say that last name? I know we just knew Stormy. Stormy just died at 94, an African-American lesbian who also presented as a man at times, credited with having thrown one of the first punches at Stonewall in 1969. As that thing says, I slugged the cop in the jaw and he was on the ground out. But that's after the cop hit her from behind.
Exactly.
And that really incited the crowd, according to the story of the time.
She had a long career as a performer.
A drag king.
And was a bouncer in lesbian bars, and just a real legend around the village, and lived a long life.
Lived at the Chelsea Hotel.
For many years.
At the 35th Pride Parade, I interviewed her when she was on a float, and she said, it's a beautiful day. There's no animosity. Everyone's having a great time, which is a little different from the atmosphere at the Stonewall.
There was a movie made about her called Stormy, the Lady of the Jewel Box, which is where she performed. You can look for that if you want to know more about her.
And then I was sorry to read that Arlene Kochman died at the age of 76, was the executive director of SAGE, for our older folks, where I was last night, actually. She was the executive director there for 12 years, big in social services and
she was a social
all that
worker,
kind of stuff,
and she was a terrific,
therapist.
Wonderful human being.
Yeah.
We worked with her when we were at Hedrick Martin doing education for some of her colleagues. It was terrific. I'm really sorry to lose Arlene. And, you know, Maya Angelou died this week. There were always, you know, was she a lesbian? Was she not? Was she whatever?
She was a great poet, and she certainly threw us in Clinton's inaugural poem that she did when she talked about gays in that. I was there, and it was quite striking.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to international news. Well, we're celebrating in South Africa the election of the first out gay black elected to parliament.
Anywhere in Africa.
Yeah.
He's 29-year-old Zakili Mbili, a member of the opposition Democratic Alliance Party. There was a white gay MP in South Africa in '99. He said the laws and the Constitution in South Africa are way ahead of society on LGBT issues.
And ahead of what's going on in Uganda, we're a little concerned because the Foreign Affairs Minister of Uganda, Sam Kutesa,
Kulisa, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, may be named the president of the UN General Assembly.
Did he do something good, or is he just in the rotation?
I think it's a rotation thing.
Well, they're voting on June 17th.
Meanwhile, a lesbian from Uganda who'd been beaten and rejected by her family, raped and beaten in a forced marriage, was rejected by Britain for asylum. Prove you're a lesbian.
Well, I mean, that right-wing anti-immigrant party, UKIP, won 27.5% of the vote in the European parliamentary elections, and it's happening all over Europe.
Yeah.
And they oppose same-sex marriage, and they're eating into conservative support and labor support there.
Canada denied visas to 10 Ugandans to just attend Toronto World Pride because they were afraid that they'd seek asylum.
Well, they do things to you like, say, how much money have you got to afford this trip? And then they think, you know, this is what. So they're going to take another look at that, though, because there has been a lot of uproar about that.
Jamaican activists went to Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania, to protest the honorary doctorate being given to Jamaica Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller. She came into office promising to help gay Jamaicans and has totally not followed through on any of that.
Couple of notes on Russia. Putin is not letting up on the United States. He criticized Conchita Wurst, not giving up on us, not the U.S. He criticized Conchita Wurst, who won the European Song Vision contest, reminded us that there are differences between the genders. And he said he is a liberal on personal morality, and he says people should have the right to live their lives as they want, but they should not be aggressive or put it up for show, like this show. So we would be out in Russia, and then
we would be out in Russia, and then we'd probably be in Russia in a prison.
In Russia, children's stories edited by acclaimed novelist Lyudmila Yulitskaya are being investigated because right-wing activists branded them as a threat to the cultural values of Russia because they promote tolerance of gay relationships.
I think we could say that's Ludmila.
Ludmila.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
In Luxembourg, a committee of the parliament has finally passed a same-sex marriage resolution. That's moving forward slowly. It's taken them some years to catch up to their neighbors, but they're on the right track.
And in Costa Rica, the National Health Insurance Agency is allowing gay folks to extend their coverage to their partners.
And Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, who took Tammy Baldwin's seat, has asked for signatures to demand that Brunei change its laws or be kicked out of the trade agreement that the Obama administration is secretly pushing forward.
Probably a bunch of people you'd have to kick out of that.
And a viewer wrote us to note that at a German opera festival, the production of La Ronde there by Arthur Schnitzler had a man with a beard playing the actress role. There's a lot of, women in pants roles in opera and everything.
That won't be happening in Russia because the Defense Ministry is running a song contest there in response to Conchita Wurst called an alternative to bearded Eurovision for children and youth. And then there's that brain study out of Israel that found that gay men raising kids develop brain activity resembling both mothers and fathers.
Wow.
In gay fathers, but not heterosexual ones, the brain had extra communication lines between emotional and cognitive structures, and that leads to optimal parenting. So, if this evidence gets presented at the next Supreme Court case, watch out, heterosexuals. You may not be able to hold on to your kids.
No, it's only straight Asian couples in the suburbs who are allowed to have kids.
Right. We're joking about these things,
Yes.
but some people take this stuff seriously.
That was a judge who told that joke.
Yeah.
All right, on to AIDS news. Well, the CDC has a new campaign. For years we've complained that governments, on the one hand, report that HIV infections are most common among men having sex with men, particularly in communities of color. And then they turn around and do campaigns against HIV and AIDS for straight white people. And we say, excuse me. So now they have a new campaign that is for men who have sex with men. It's called Start Talking, Stop HIV. And they've got a series of videos. They've got print work. You can go to cdc.gov, Act Against AIDS, to see all these materials. But here's one of their PSAs, 30 seconds, never stop talking.
While you're out there, looking for Mr. Right or Mr. Right now, as you get to know each other. Most definitely before you, even after you become one, or add a little one. Never stop talking about ways to protect yourself and your partner from HIV. Keep the conversation going at cdc.gov/actagainst-AIDS.
Oh, those are going to be out in a Republican administration, aren't they?
Well, it's a good message.
Yes.
Keep talking.
Well, they got a good message that they're promoting. I don't know if it's just in New York, but it's from ACREA. It says, when it comes to sex, age is not a condom. And they're putting posters up all around town. We have one of them at bus stops from our friend James Lister, if we can get those images up. And it's all about, and then if we could show the other image closer up of another couple, it's all about saying that just because you're old, you're not protected from HIV.
Doesn't mean you're not having sex, and it doesn't mean that you're immune.
So it's very sex and age positive.
Yes.
Now, California has passed a law mandating condom use during adult film shoots and STI testing for actors. LGBT groups like the Harvey Milk Club and Transgender Law Center say proponents of the bill are on a moral campaign versus the industry and are silencing sex workers.
Well, this has been a debate for a long time, but the sex worker, the porn film industry has always trumpeted the fact that they mandate a lot of testing. But to me, that's, as my grandmother would say, shutting the barn door after the horse is out. We believe in a variety of approaches, including Truvada now, which may change this whole debate about condoms and porn. If people can prove they're on Truvada, have zero or undetectable viral load, that could change the condom debate.
And the New York State Assembly has passed medical marijuana. It's on to our fractured Senate.
Yeah, they've passed it 7 times now, and the Senate seems to have no appetite for this, although one of the leaders of the Senate is pushing this, and maybe they'll get it through this time. The governor's a little skeptical, I think.
He's fairly conservative.
Yes, he is. All right, entertainment news.
Oh, we have, where are we now? Okay. HBO is developing a drama called Open City about New York in the late 60s, including pre-Stonewall gay rights efforts. And one of the consultants is the owner of the Stonewall. Or was the owner of the Stonewall at the time.
Yeah. I'll cheer that when I see it years from now and find it to be a 2-minute storyline.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the WNBA, Women's National Basketball Association.
is that what it
Were you
stands for?
wondering? Yes. Will find, for ever since they started, people have said, lesbians are a major part of your market, like a third of your audience.
Sure.
Why aren't you marketing to them?
Sure.
Now, all these years later, they have finally decided to. Individual teams have marketed to a lesbian audience, but now finally the whole league will. They're the teams will show up at Pride events. They're playing a special Pride game on June 22nd, Tulsa versus Chicago. And I think we have a little video about the WNBA marketing to lesbians, if we can roll that.
Maybe not.
Maybe we can't.
Maybe we don't. All right.
Okay.
No.
No
Nay.
video.
All right. Well, I'll tell then if our director will get back, I'll tell you about a play I saw again at the Brits Off-Broadway series at 59 East 59th Street Theaters. This one was called Chalk Farm. We have a picture, I hope. There they are. It's about a teen from that London neighborhood, Chalk Farm, who gets caught up in the riots of 2011, where I was in London. It hit many neighborhoods, played by...
the riots were about?
What were they about? And that's the way the play opens. He says they were about, lacking services. They were about, anger over a shooting. He says they weren't about any of those things, and they were about all those things.
Okay.
There was a lot of anger building up. And the play's by Kieran Hurley and A.J. Taudovan. It's a two-hander. Thomas Dennis as Jamie and Julia Taudovan as his protective mom. It's a very smart rumination on how things fall apart and questions about what it means to love when they do. Because his mother loves him. She loves him very much. And she figures he's been out there, but he's saying no. And, he's going to get caught by the cameras. Well, it's fascinating. It's only an hour. I recommend it.
One of our viewers recommends the BBC series In the Flesh. Now, again, we're going by the viewer note.
We report, you decide.
But he reported there was a gay zombie kiss In the Flesh on the BBC.
Well, the showing of The Normal Heart on HBO, which many of you probably saw this week, about AIDS in the early 80s on Sunday, did something for my newspaper. My obit of Ed Koch, which talked about his, of course, being a closet case, the former mayor of New York last year, got 4,000 hits on Sunday and 8,000 hits on Monday because people were obviously saying, Koch was gay, and checking it out online.
At Gay City News.
And yes, Gay City News. He, just like the Pope is Catholic, Ed Koch was a closet case. And you saw The Normal Heart. No, finally.
I did. I was, I am impressed by the number of people who were moved by it, by all the reports of people in tears and people hit again by the force of the epidemic. Certainly, we were in the midst of that and hit very hard and worked very hard and all of that. I, like you, was not as moved by the movie itself.
As we were by the play.
The play, I was the first time I saw the play, I wasn't particularly swept away by it. But the Broadway version a few years ago really got to me and really moved me. And this movie version was, I don't know if it was.
I think it was somewhat.
The actors.
I think it was somewhat sentimentalized.
I thought it was caricatures of gay men. I thought it was speechifying.
The movie is full of. The play is full of speeches.
Yes.
And in fact, all these actors in it said, we always used to do scenes from it in drama school because it had so many great speeches.
Maybe the interpolation of the more personal stories in the movies made the speeches stand out as speechifying more for me.
Right.
I think people probably had a variety of reactions. I'd be curious about your reactions. I am struck by the fact that our reaction was not what a lot of people's reaction was.
I've been reading a lot about it on Facebook. You'd have to have a complete art of stone not to be moved at times just remembering all this stuff, and it did bring up a lot of those memories.
Yeah, but I don't want to see Mark Ruffalo playing Larry Kramer. It just doesn't work for me. However, Larry now, because this is evidently a hit on HBO, is reportedly writing a sequel.
I assume that will take us up to the Act Up days.
Well, that would be nice, but we'll see whether that happens. But by all means, tell us what you thought of The Normal Heart.
Maybe if he does it again, he shouldn't call the character Ned Weeks. He should call him Larry Kramer.
Now, coming up in New York in the middle of June is the Human Rights Watch Film Festival, June 12th through 22nd. They're going to have three what sound like very interesting LGBT-themed films. The first is about the Navy SEAL Kristen Beck, who was transgender and
who wasn't crazy about Chelsea Manning.
Okay.
Maybe that'll come up.
But it's an interesting story.
Absolutely.
The second one is one I'm going to see at a screening next week about the group of lesbians who were out, young African-American lesbians, out in Greenwich Village one night.
They were from Jersey.
Yes, catcalled by some idiot on the street, and they got into a fight. And the girls ended up going to prison,
right?
Which I thought was a horrible story. So there's a movie about that. And then the third one is about George Takei.
Yeah.
So
they all sound interesting.
They do. So if you're in New York, Human Rights Watch Film Festival.
I saw a play on Broadway, I guess last season, by Douglas Carter Bean called The Nance, starring Nathan Lane. The Nance is a figure in vaudeville, was a very effeminate character for laughs, uniquely played by a gay man, in this case, Nathan Lane. And it's also a love story, and a very kind of moving one. And they're going to put it in the movies around the country just at the end of June. So you've got to go to screenvision.com, and look up The Nance and find the dates and the times. It's playing in Alabama. It's playing everywhere. It's playing in like 300 screens, and I highly recommend it.
And the Gore Vidal movie that we showed you a clip from last week, Gore Vidal, The United States of Amnesia, is being extended in New York at the IFC Center and is opening around the country in all the LA, San Francisco, Denver, Philadelphia, Chicago. Look up Gore Vidal, The United States of Amnesia, to get the schedule in your area.
And we are coming up on Pride Month here. Happy Pride Month, everybody.
Yes.
We try to celebrate it every day.
We do. And they'll be celebrating it in San Francisco. I just wanted to remind you that the National Queer Arts Festival is taking place there all through June, starting this weekend, and has this play, Homophile, about Sam Stewart, we told you about last week. That sounds very interesting. And there's a movie called Just Gender that is going to play around U.S. cities in June. Just Gender, which is a movie about the trans experience, and looks interesting and something you might want to look for.
Right.
Free Speech TV, if you see us through them on satellite or whatever, your local company is in Pledge Week, June 2nd through 15th. The schedule changes. Check
We're
out
on
them.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, though.
Or write to Andy Hum at AOL.com, and he'll give you all the details on the schedule.
I will, I promise.
And we will see you next week.
Thanks for being with us.